Hi, everyone. Welcome to Bridging Gaps and Gaining Experience for Your Resume. I'm Taylor, the STEM career coach, and joining me today is Yanni, the School of Security and Global Studies career coach. There are a lot of great topics that we're going to be covering in this webinar. This session explores a lot about why experience matters, how internships and volunteering support career growth, and how to address and communicate resume gaps. Our goal for you during this webinar and this session is to really learn about the different types of experience, how to develop those transferable skills, and signal those skills and experiences that value to employers, and how it can be strategically identified and presented on a resume. And getting us started with this webinar will be Yanni. Go ahead, Yanni.
Hi, everyone. Today we want to set the foundation by emphasizing why experience plays such a critical role in today's hiring process. While education is important, employers tend to focus more heavily on demonstrated skills and applied experience. This is especially true in competitive or transitioning job markets. It's also important to normalize that resume gaps are very common. Many professionals experience periods of unemployment, transitions, or pauses, and these gaps are often understandable when clearly explained. Employers are generally less concerned about the gap itself and more interested in how that time was used. Internships and volunteering are introduced here as intentional career building strategies, not fillers. When aligned with career goals, these experiences show initiative, adaptability, and continued skill development, all qualities employers value. Resume gaps simply refer to periods of time when someone was not formally employed in a traditional role. These gaps can occur for many valid reasons, and they are not uncommon. Some gaps happen due to time between jobs, such as during layoffs, extended job searches, or market shifts. Others occur during career changes, when individuals intentionally step away to gain new skills or reposition into a different field. Life circumstances can also play a significant role. Education, caregiving responsibilities, military service, health needs, or relocation often require temporary career pauses. Another important type of gap is time spent building experience in a new field. Internships and volunteering, training programs, and short-term roles are often part of that strategic plan to develop credibility and practical experience during transitions. So let's discuss internships. An internship is a short-term, structured work experience designed to provide hands-on exposure to a specific field or role. These opportunities allow individuals to apply what they've learned, gain industry insight, and build relevant experience. Internships provide real-world learning, help participants understand workplace expectations, and often include mentorship or feedback. They may be paid or unpaid depending on the organization and industry, and some offer academic credit. Flexibility is another key feature. Many internships are available part-time or full-time and can be in formats that include remote, in-person, or hybrid options. While internships are often associated with students, they are increasingly used by recent graduates, professionals seeking current relevant experience to transition into a new role or industry. Volunteering includes any unpaid experience where time and skills are contributed in a structured or intentional way. From a career perspective, volunteering can provide meaningful real-world experience when aligned with professional goals. Opportunities may exist within nonprofit or community organizations supporting education, health, social services, environmental efforts, or local programs. Skills-based volunteering is especially valuable. This involves contributing professional skills such as administrative work, IT support, compliance, documentation, finance, budgeting, marketing, or communications in a way that closely mirror workplace responsibilities. Volunteer roles can be short-term projects or ongoing commitments and may be completed remotely or in person. When positioned well in a resume, volunteering demonstrates professionalism, accountability, and active skill development. This all leads into the transferable skills that these experiences help develop. Internships and volunteering are powerful tools for building transferable skills, abilities that apply across all roles, industries, and work environments. These experiences allow individuals to develop both technical and professional skill sets. Emphasis should be placed on hard skills, which are teachable and job specific, such as software proficiency, data analysis, reporting, documentation, or technical tools. Soft skills such as communication, teamwork, adaptability, and time management are also developed through these experiences and remain highly valued by employers. The key takeaway is that internships and volunteering don't just fill time. They actively build skills that can be clearly communicated on a resume, discussed in interviews, and applied across multiple career paths.
Thank you, Yanni, for those overviews and information. So I'm going to take it a little bit further with some of the topics that were covered and go deep dive into identifying relevant internships and volunteer opportunities. So kind of building off what Yanni was saying when it comes to some of those places that we can look, let's really deep dive into, well, how do I find them? So when I talk with students and alumni about internships and volunteer opportunities, I often notice they feel limited by what they can easily find online. Many assume that if an opportunity doesn't appear on a job board or in a quick Google search, it simply doesn't exist. And that mindset can unintentionally block access to valuable experiences that are out there. I always encourage students and alumni to stop thinking only in terms of post-it roles and start paying attention to what's actually happening in their community. A lot of organizations out there need help and additional support, but they don't always label it as an opportunity. Sometimes the role may not even exist until you ask. For example, I once worked with a student who was interested in wildlife rehabilitation and conservation who lived in South Carolina. She felt really discouraged during this internship and volunteer search because most of the opportunities she was finding in her area were tied to marine life, which didn't match her interests. And so she wasn't really sure where else to look, and she felt really stuck. She had utilized, of course, the job boards and different websites and local areas. But what she hadn't considered were the smaller organizations within her commuting distance, such as wildlife rehabilitation centers and small zoos that are connected to historic plantations. That wasn't something she thought about. So that focus in those that focus was on conservation work that they had right there on plantations. So those organizations, they weren't posting internships online. She ended up reaching out directly to a few of them and asked about volunteer opportunities. She introduced herself, and that outreach actually led to an internship, one that was created for her. And that eventually led to a full-time role right after she graduated with her environmental science degree. So I provide this example because this experience is a really great reminder that opportunities don't always show up on searches or on LinkedIn. Some organizations don't advertise internships or volunteer positions widely, and others don't even have that formal internship or volunteer program at all. In many cases, these opportunities come from tuning into it, what exists locally, networking, and being willing to ask those questions and step outside your comfort zone and reaching out. So this is why focusing on your community or what's within that reasonable commuting distance is so important. There are nonprofits, like what Yanni was saying. There are clinics and agencies and organizations doing this related work in a wide range of career paths. And those career paths, they can intersect. Businesses everywhere. We have public health, sociology, psychology, education, environmental fields, engineering, data, IT, logistics, and security. All of these, you can find internships and volunteer opportunities within all of these industries and in the places that you might least expect it. Like that student did not think about reaching out to a historic plantation for a wildlife rehabilitation and conservation opportunity, right? Like that was really outside the box right there, but that's where the opportunity was at for her, and that's where they are at. So when it comes to finding these internships and volunteer roles, it's not about applying everywhere or where we think is the most obvious. It's about taking a very strategic approach and learning how to identify where work is already happening and it's often right in front of you. And then from there, you can start looking differently at the places you already interact with. Maybe you've been a visitor. She has visited those plantations. Maybe it's, as a community member, there's something you've been a part of, or even as a service. Have you worked somewhere or been somewhere, not necessarily worked, but as a service recipient, have you visited a local shop that you might want to, reconnect with? So when we talk about finding volunteer internship experiences and identifying them, I encourage those to stop thinking only in terms of those postings and start paying attention to what's actually happening around you and in your community. And here are several examples of what I mean by this. And I'm going to really deep dive into some examples and listing some information off, but it's really to help you kind of have that light bulb moment of, oh, I had not considered that before. So please listen through this part because I am going to repeat some different ideas. However, they're connected. So here's some examples of what I mean by what is in the area where you may have visited or where you've had service from. So maybe you have some historic sites that offer tours, and maybe you say, I'm not interested in history. Well, that's okay. You're not a history major. But if you are, there's historic plantations and preservation societies and or living museums, and they often need support behind the scenes. And that can include, here's where it kind of expands from the history aspect of things. They have education programs. If you want to become an educator, it could be a great way to get experience. Data tracking, there's daily operations, logistics, basic IT systems, security during those public events, public history initiatives, and preservation work. So most people, and even maybe even you, have visited these types of places for fun and never think to reach out to them to volunteer. And the same concept applies to those small cultural centers or museums or heritage sites in your local area. You may have history museums, space museums, cultural heritage centers or community archives. And these organizations need help with updating and organizing research or historical research, organizing archives, updating websites, managing those digital records, community outreach, even advocacy efforts, education programming. So, especially these smaller organizations, they need that additional support, and they may not have it right there on their website. And maybe they do, and might have a get involved section there, but reaching out or, even looking into them. And they're also a business, so they may have some administrative things on the back end. And then there's nature-focused organizations, and they're another really great example. So there's nature preserves, land trusts, wildlife rehabilitation centers, such as local nature centers or animal rescue organizations that often need help again with that data collection, public education, operation support, volunteer coordination, especially when we're talking like animal rescues, technology, advocacy campaigns, and administrative logistics. Even when there's no formal posting, you can always and look into find those strong connections for these different roles that they may need assistance with. So reaching out to them directly, again, can be really helpful. And then you can also find some strong connections in the public health field and data work in community gardens, urban farms, and food access organizations. So maybe, you're interested in the public health or health sciences or environmental science or human services. You can find, and of course, business and even IT, cyber are going to be found within these types of organizations like urban farms, food justice nonprofits, and community health food programs. They often rely on volunteers for education initiatives, food access programs, inventory systems, distribution logistics, data analysis, event coordination, and so much more. And on the healthcare side, you have nonprofit healthcare and human service organizations such as Planned Parenthood, community health centers, mobile clinics, free clinics, reproductive support. So there are a lot of these organizations that need volunteers to support patient patients, educations, advocacy, outreach, scheduling. Um, so you see these similar needs across youth mentoring programs like Big Brother, Big Sister, victim service organizations, disability advocacy groups such as the ARC, immigration and refugee assistance programs. To locate opportunities, check out these company websites. So you're gonna find what is in your area. And then once you find what's in your area, you think outside the box of some of these examples I listed because you might be interested again in business and not think to reach out to a history museum or a space museum. But there's opportunities there. So locate these opportunities and go directly to their company websites. This is the next step to identifying internship and volunteer opportunities. So once you locate some of these organizations, check out their website. And usually they have a volunteer section, get involved, or internship section. Check out that information first on their website. And if they don't have anything like that listed on their website, maybe they are a really small organization, or just an organization that doesn't have that information up to date, reach out directly, give them a call, give them an email, stop by. See if there's any opportunities. Introduce yourself, just like that student I talked about here in the very beginning, because there may not be an opportunity, but one might be able to be created for you because they might want that additional assistance. Maybe it's marketing, maybe it's fundraising. Everything I just listed needs help with marketing and fundraising in some capacity. Another option with finding these opportunities are connecting with your alumni network and having these conversations on what you're looking for. And they may be able to help connect you. On CareerLink, we have a community page where you can get connected with our alumni. On LinkedIn, you can filter out those who have attended AMU and APU. So get connected with the alumni. That's another really great way. Utilize that. So those are some ways to identify and start that research on finding opportunities that fit with what you're looking to do and give you that support, for one, getting that experience, but also filling in these resume gaps. So let's talk about resume gaps. Resume gaps happen for many reasons, and you might have gone back to school, changed career paths, taken off, taking care of a family member. Maybe you've had your own personal health issues, you've completed your military service, or you're a spouse, or you're impacted by the layoffs and economic changes like COVID in 2020. This is very common. I've spoken with a lot of students and alumni who might have a 4 or 5 year gap because they were searching before COVID. They were searching during COVID, and COVID wasn't just 2020, it was 21, it was 22, and there were, those ramifications of what happened as the pandemic did come to an end. So there are times that we have these gaps, and that's a very common one. And gaps can also happen when you're transferring or waiting on licenses or certifications. We see this often in fields like education and healthcare. Teachers may be navigating state license transfers. Medical professionals may be completing different exams or clinical hours. You might be going through the credentialing process. And even in IT or trades or business, you tend to have certifications, or you have those timelines that might put a pause in your employment. So whatever the reason may be, you may have a gap period, and that might be in the past and that might be right now. So if you are right now having that gap while actively job searching, I encourage you, this is a valuable window of time, because job searching can be exhausting, and focusing on applications and only applications, it can start to lead to burnout and burnout very quickly. So one of the best things you can do during a gap is intentionally fill it with something relevant. That might mean taking on a short-term project, volunteering in a role connected to your field, freelancing, or even securing an internship. These experiences, they help you stay engaged, they help you build skills, and they show the employers that you didn't just take that pause, you stayed active, you stayed purposeful, you were intentional with the steps that you were taking. And you know, the most important thing is to know this, that resume gaps are common. Employers see them all the time, especially in today's job market. And when it comes to these gaps, whether it's past or present, what employers are usually focused on isn't that gap itself. They're not like, oh, you were unemployed for 5 years, or oh, you didn't have employment for 6 months. They're asking, when they see this, what did this person do during that time? What skills did they gain? How does this experience connect to the role they're applying for now? If that's something that pops out. So instead of stressing about the gap itself, think about how you can explain it clearly and confidently when you get into that interview. Where are you taking courses? Where are you getting a certification? Were you a part of your your child's PTA or coaching, which are things we're going to talk about here in the next slide. So think about those things that you were doing in that time. And during that time, you know, were you working on any of those short-term projects? Because all of that counts, past and then current. Internships, volunteer roles, project-based work, even that unpaid experience, they show employers what continued and, that you continue learning and that you continue building that momentum to be ready for that role, that perfect role that you're applying for. And staying active, I do want to put this out there that staying active doesn't always mean something formal. It doesn't mean you have a formal internship. It could be becoming an active member with AMU or APU club. So maybe right now you are, you finished your degree and you're job searching. Get active in a club. Being involved again in your child's like school PTA or help coordinating events, managing communications, supporting programs behind the scenes. There's a lot that goes into something like PTA. Coaching a team. I've had parents who have coached their children's soccer or baseball teams, mentoring youth, supporting extracurricular activities. That all demonstrates leadership and organization and teamwork. Think about where you're at right now in this moment. Maybe if, a child or, that's one of the things that you don't have, think about what is happening right now that you can be actively a part of in organizations. You might consider writing and publishing articles or pieces for industry-related publications or professional blogs or outlets. AMU, APU Edge, we have students, alumni who have published articles on there, and this shows subject matter expert knowledge and communication skills and the continued engagement in your field. And these are things that show that you are still building that experience. It demonstrates to employers that you're passionate. So the key when it comes to understanding these resume gaps and applying these gaps is to take a step back and look at what's already happening in your life. Again, is it are you taking care of family? Because that's something you can list on a resume as a caretaker. Are you, raising children? What can you be active with in their life that would help fill in that gap on the resume? Are you, are you a pet caretaker? Like maybe there's something local where you get involved with taking care of pets. Think about what's happening in your life because many of those experiences, they create those opportunities to stay involved, grow our skills, and strengthen your resume. Even if you don't originally see them as career experience. I just said taking care of animals, right? That is experience, especially if you want to work with animals, right? That's relevant. You still have to be able to communicate with owners or vets, whatever it might be. There's still a key player in doing that role. It's not like, oh, I walk dogs. Like, no, there was some physical exercise, there was leash training or whatever else could be involved in that could be relevant for that job that you're wanting to go through. Nutrition, yes, these are transferable skills and they are just as important. So the key is to be honest. You don't have to over explain or apologize for any gap. Just focus on what you've gained and how you've prepared, and how it's prepared you for what's next. Now let's talk about what internships and volunteering communicate on a resume. So when employers review a resume, they're not just scanning for paid job titles. They're looking for patterns and signals that help them understand how you approach your career, how you make your decisions, and develop your skills. Internships and volunteer experiences communicate far more than most people realize. Internships in particular, they show initiative, intentional career planning. It also shows employers that you didn't just wait passively for opportunities, but you actively sought out experiences to gain that exposure and build those skills. They demonstrate a commitment to professional growth, especially taking those applied skills that aren't always developed in the classroom setting. Because in a classroom, we're getting that academic knowledge, but now an employer wants to know, and a lot of students say, oh, they need 1 to 2 years or 3 to 5 years of experience for an entry-level role, along with a degree. Yes, that is now often true. Employers want the experience. They want to know that you're capable. So from that employer's perspective, internships show your willingness to learn, adapt, and take that feedback because in an internship, that's often what happens. It's a learning opportunity to improve and continue to strengthen. And as well as you're able to operate in a professional environment. It also clearly communicates your interest in a specific industry or role, and it helps employers see the direction and focus on your career path. So again, I often hear students In our coaching appointments, reference concentrations or coursework as a way to show interest or knowledge in a particular area. And yes, while those are helpful to provide on a resume, it's not a determining factor on what concentration to get, or what specific courses to take, unless of course the job says that you have to have this specific course. But I can't say that's something I've come across. But keeping in mind what tends to make the greater impact is the action and the applied experience. So employers, again, they respond more strongly to the evidence that you've tested your interests, that you've gained that real world exposure and directly engaged in that type of work that you want to pursue. So if there's a concentration that you're interested in the academic side, then pursue that for volunteer work, pursue that for an internship. So that way the employer knows this is where my interest lies. If there's a few courses that are very specific to what you want to do, gain the experience in that, because that's what's going to make the most important impact. They're going to see the degree as the qualifier, but they're going to see your internship, and as we move into volunteer, as the this is what I want. This is what I'm passionate about. So volunteer roles, internships, and project-based experiences, they show employers where your interests truly lie because they demonstrate how you chose to spend your time, not just what you studied. So volunteering is very similar to interning, but what sets volunteering apart in particular, it communicates, an equal amount of value when it comes to the sets of strengths that you have as internships. But volunteer roles, they showcase those transferable skills, depending on the level of your role. Sometimes internships might have a higher level role of responsibility. So that's where things can kind of differ. But in terms of volunteering, if we're kind of on a basic level role, it showcases those transferable skills such as communication, leadership, organization, problem solving, and all of these soft skills, they apply across nearly every career field. So they also demonstrate the reliability and accountability. And because it's volunteer, you're consistently showing up without any financial incentive. And it speaks to really strong work ethic, commitment, and passion. So rather than saying, I'm passionate about environmental science, it's I showed up weekly to do park cleanup, or I worked on filtration of the water systems and in the environment, whatever it is. That shows you're passionate. You went out and did something. You went out and helped an organization. You went out and served your community. That shows your passion versus saying it. I can say I'm passionate about environmental science. Am I? I don't know. I don't have anything to back that up. So you want to be able to prove it. And volunteering does that. So volunteering can also highlight values, again, with the alignment and community engagement, qualities many organizations actively look for when building their teams. And this is especially true, again, like in fields like environmental science, they are looking for people who are out there. They want to know that you don't have to be doing it 24/7, but they want people who really are out there trying to make a difference in the world in terms of how the world is revolving. So healthcare is another really big one. Education, history, and those especially technical fields like IT and cybersecurity. That's where passion for the work often matters just as much as that technical knowledge. So for individuals with employment gaps, volunteer work, or if you're trying to break into any industry, volunteer work is especially powerful because it shows that continued skill use and that ongoing engagement and forward momentum during that gap time, or just in general, trying to keep moving forward to improving who you are as a professional. So next, let's talk about internships and volunteer experience and how to list them on your resume. Because we've talked about, oh, if I have a gap, past, current, possible future. This question comes up a lot in our conversations. How do I fill in this gap? Well, here's good practice. If the experience is relevant and current to the role you're applying for, you can list it under the experience section. It doesn't have to be in a separate volunteer internship section. And you might say, why? Well, because employers care far more about the relevance than whether you were paid. So let me ask you this. If you built skills, supported real projects, real accomplishments, or contributed to those outcomes in any way, does that sound like experience to you? If I were to sit here and tell you that I was a part of fundraising $500,000, and I was the one who was advocating, putting the marketing materials together and some other things, I sat here and tell you this. Does that sound like experience to you? Doesn't matter if it was paid or unpaid. No, it matters. So you can absolutely list that experience in you can absolutely list internships and volunteer work under your experience section. Um, and next, when you write out your bullet points, focus on accomplishments, not just those duties. So if you are going to put this experience in your experience section, it needs to read like a professional experience. And, instead of saying maybe you were working for an organization, not working, but you were volunteering or interning for an organization and you're doing more administrative work. So instead of saying that you were responsible for filing documents, because you might say, well, all I did was file documents. Well, ask yourself, what changed or improved because you did that work? That leads into the next point. Focus on those outcomes, not just those tasks. Employers want to know, what impact did you have? What problems did you help solve? And what skills did you use? So think about that. Think about responsible filing documents. Well, what impact did you have doing that? Did you reduce workload for other coworkers and we were able to see more patients? Did you turn that filing system into an electronic system where you're manually doing it and now you have an electronic backup? What skills did you use to do that? Did you have to use different platforms or software systems? Those are things to ask yourself. So whenever possible, also try to quantify those results. Numbers help tell the story and your level of expertise very quickly. For example, instead of something vague, like maintain documentation, you might say maintain compliance documentation for 5+ projects, improving audit readiness. So even if you don't have those exact numbers, estimates are okay, but make sure that they're very close to what that estimate would be. You want it as accurate as possible, but think about this. When it comes to thinking about measurable data, did you support multiple projects? Did you work with a team? If you worked with a team, how many were in that team? Did you help improve a process? Did you help save time? If you help save time, by how much time? What's that percentage? Or how often did you work with a team? I want to put that one out there too. Doesn't always have to be like, I worked with 5 people. Well, I worked with a team weekly. I worked with a team daily for a specific project. So the big takeaway here is this, is that internships and volunteer work absolutely count as that experience when you communicate them clearly and strategically, because that's the big key is, if you're going to have it in your experience, you want it to be strategic. You want it to read as if it were paid. And that's how you want to communicate it, because that is still very real work. If you treat the experience like real work, employers will too. Now, you might say, well, I don't want to put it in my experience section. That's okay as well. You can list a volunteer header. You can provide an internship header as well and list those opportunities under there, especially if you have a good bit of those opportunities, you might want to section that out. But if you're filling in a gap with a current experience or past experience, it's okay to add it in there. Also, you want your most relevant work to stand out first. So in terms of a chronological style resume, because there's a few others, you have combination and functional that you consider as well in the private sector side of things. Federal is a whole different conversation, but in terms of the private sector side, you want your most current, your most highlighted skills, your qualifiers to be the first thing that they see on the resume. So if your education is the thing that's going to qualify you for that IT role, you have no other IT experience, you're going to want that education listed first. But if you have 15 years of IT experience and those certifications, that's going to be listed more towards the top of your resume, maybe your education listed a little bit further below, because that professional experience might be your biggest qualifier. If you're filling in those gaps, especially if it's a longer gap, and your current volunteer or internship is most relevant, you're probably going to provide that over your experience section, rather than below the experience section. So you want the most relevant work to the job to stand out and to stand out very quickly. But there are other ways. In CareerLink, we have those samples, so feel free to check out CareerLink. So now let's talk about how to make your experience count, whether it's an internship, volunteer role, or even a short-term opportunity. And my question for you to think about is, have you ever finished an experience and then struggled to explain what you gained from it? Whether it was a work experience or just in general life experience, were you able to explain what happened or what you got out of it? And it's totally normal if you say no. I can honestly say no to that. And this is where it's going to be really important to think about when you come to gaining these different experiences and filling in those gaps on the resume. Is one way to maximize the value of any experience is to set learning goals up front. So if you take on a volunteer role or an internship role, before you even start it, or even as you're exploring it, I want you to ask yourself, what do I want to learn here? What skills do I want to build? And what does success look like for me when I complete this? And success can be anything. It could be that you've gained a skill. It could be that you gained one network. You gained one connection, someone that you can reach out to for mentoring or for a reference. What does success look like for you there? And that's a really big one because that's what's going to help keep you motivated in these roles and to keep you going. Next, this one's big. Track your accomplishments as you go, not months later when you're updating your resume. I want you to think of, when you're updating your resume months later, because you might forget what those accomplishments were. So, and that leads it to write it down when it's fresh. So I want you to think about, when you're tracking your accomplishments and you're writing them down, at the end of that day or the end of that week, did you complete a project? Did you improve a process? Did you support a team? Did you learn a new system or tool? Write it down. Keep track of it. Have a master resume where you have everything on it. It could be 5 or 6 pages long, but you have all of your accomplishments on there with corresponding with that volunteer organization or that internship organization, wherever you gain that experience, keep that master copy. So that way, when you go to apply for a role or you're speaking to your experience, you have it ready. You can you can read through a job announcement and say, oh, I've done this, this, and this. And you can tailor your 2-page resume down because you have everything ready to go. You remember. Because sometimes you might say, oh, I think I've done that, but I don't remember what came out of it. We don't want that. We want you prepared. So write it down when it's fresh. And this can also, this doesn't have to feel awkward, but another important step is to ask for feedback. Constructive feedback is really important to helping make that experience count because that's how you improve, that's how you better yourself for those professional opportunities and moving forward in your career. And asking for references. Positive references, because you can ask for a reference, and though it's implied that they're going to be positive, it doesn't have to be. And yes, I have had those conversations. So make sure when you ask someone to be a reference, be a positive reference. And even if you don't have a job lined up, just say, in the future, would you mind, being a positive reference for me if I reach out, to have someone speak to my skills and abilities or my work ethic. Have them lined up and ready to go. So that way you're not scrambling to get those 3 to 5 references when you apply for a job. And, maybe you're waiting another year or two. You might think, oh, I don't need to connect with someone now. Yes, get that reference now lined up. Maintain that relationship with them over the years. Keep in contact. So that way you have them ready to go to be able to support you and not be a part of that hindrance when it comes to the application process or feeling stressed out. It will help your future self to do it now, if you feel that they can speak strongly to what you've done. And when it comes to that, ask yourself, when it comes to looking for a reference, who supervised you or who did you work closely with that could speak to your skills or your work ethic later on. So those are the types of people that can provide those references. And again, you want to keep everything updated on your resume. Keep it updated regularly, even if it's just adding a few bullet points. Future you, I can guarantee you will be very thankful. And I want you to remember when it comes to this whole process, there has to be a mindset shift. And I want you to remember that you're not just filling time, you're not just filling a gap, you're building a career narrative. It's not like, oh, I have to go out here and get a volunteer role because I have to fill in this gap. Oh, I have to go get an internship because I have to fill this gap, or I don't have this, I don't have that. No, you are being intentional. You are building your career narrative. So you have to shift your mindset. In order for me to achieve what I want to achieve, I have to put that effort into it. And by putting that effort into it, it's finding this experience. It's creating my own project. I'm going to build my career narrative. I'm going to make myself get to where I want to go. I have that control. Every experience that you have, it's a chapter that helps explain where you've been, what you've learned, and where you're going next. So as you take on an internship or a volunteer role, or maybe your own project, ask yourself, how does this move my story forward? How does this move my career forward? So with that, to wrap things up, I want to leave you with a few key takeaways. First, and this is important, resume gaps are normal and manageable. They happen to people at every career stage, and they do not disqualify you from opportunities. Second, internships and volunteer experiences create real, credible experience. If you're learning, contributing, and building skills, that experience absolutely counts, whether it's paid or unpaid. And another big takeaway is how you frame the experience. That matters. And that matters more than the gap itself. Employers are far more interested in what you learned, how you grew, and how that experience connects to what you want to do next. And finally, remember this. Be intentional. Experience leads to stronger confidence and better employability. You want to you you want to be ready. You want to be prepared. When you're clear about your goals, tracking your accomplishments, and telling your story well, your resume and interview answers, it will become so much easier. So instead of asking, will this look bad on my resume? Will this gap look bad on my resume? Will this time off look bad on my resume? Or how do I speak to this in an interview? This isn't positive. Of course, it's positive. I want you to try asking yourself, how does this experience strengthen my career story? How does this time off strengthen it? That mindset shift makes all the difference because even if there's a gap, there was something happening. You are still growing, you are still being molded and shaped and taking different steps. It's part of your career journey, it's a part of your story, and that mind shift will make a big difference. Thank you for attending this webinar with Yanni and I. We'd love to get connected with you. So please feel free to reach out through your eCampus or via email. We're here and happy to support you every step of the way. Thanks for tuning in.